All right, everybody. How are we all doing? Better now? Something different, right?
Define better now.
It's true. I need to define my terms if I'm going to say, is it better now? Hey, I like that. So I thought today I could talk a little bit about one of the health markers. So one of the things that I'm trying to get you guys to all realize is that if you go to your doctor, they're going to look at you. They're going to put you through a battery of tests that include things like weigh you, get your height, get your blood pressure. If it's a physical, you might get blood work done. And often you have conversations with your doctor right afterwards, and usually they're not conversations most of us want to hear. It's just usually how that goes. Like, you're going to die soon, and then the whole world's ending. Yeah, true that, right? So one of the things they tend to get for a health marker, which there are very many of them, but one of the health markers that I think often gets, whoa, Mike, call him up. One of the health markers they're going to get into and discuss with you when they talk about your health is something called BMI, which is something known as body mass index. So body mass index is nothing more than a ratio of your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. And while it does serve some utility, the original impetus for body mass index stuff, I'm almost certainly had to do with starvation and making sure people had enough body mass on their body to survive. But they also realized that you could go on the opposite end of that spectrum and tell someone basically how fat and sloppy they are. Problem with body mass index: it neglects one huge characteristic of your weight. Who knows what it is? You guys already said it. Muscle mass. Big problem with BMI. It does not take into account what you are made of. I don't mean sugar and spice and everything nice. I mean how much fat you have on your body relative to fat-free mass. So basically all the mass that you could get measured if you were to actually figure out your body fat percentage or your lean body mass would be FM, your fat mass, which is simply fat. And there are two types of that, which we'll talk about in a second. And you have your fat-free mass. That's going to be your organs, that's going to be your muscles, that's going to be your bones, your connective tissue, and the water you have on your body. So you guys have probably seen those scales where you step on them and get the metal plates and they give you a body fat percentage, or one of the handheld things that I have over there. What that machine does is determine resistance in your body, because the more muscle you have, the more water you have, the faster the current is conducted through the implement. So when you do that, you stand on one foot, it sends the signal up to your left foot, goes to the top of your head, goes down to your right foot. How long that signal takes to travel determines your fat mass. It's nothing more than a math equation. Now, when it comes to fat-free mass and fat mass, essentially when you get a breakout, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get fat mass, and fat-free mass is most often called LBM, lean body mass, things that are not fat. Now, there are two types of fat. Some of the fat you have in your body is important and necessary. We need it, so we call that essential fat. And then we have non-essential fat. Can anyone tell me what they think the difference is between non-essential and essential fat? It goes very similar to essential nutrients. If you guys remember what essential means in that sense. You need it to live, right? There's a certain amount of fat. If you don't have it, you die, right? But that's typically things to create the hormones in your body, the cholesterol you need for your tissues to have structure. A little bit of fat to protect some of your visceral organs. Non-essential fat is all the fat that you don't want. You see in the mirror and you're like, ugh, I don't want that anymore, right? Or the fat that surrounds our organs, which makes people, extremely unhealthy. Now, when it comes time to talk to your doctor, who here has ever heard their doctor talk to them about their lean body mass? Anyone ever? Here's what I want you to do next time you go. Ask. What about muscle mass or lean body mass? Mostly I'm curious. I want you guys to come back and tell me what they said. I don't know what they'll say to you. They might. Yeah. When they tell you you're, sorry, hey, Joyce, sorry, you're obese. And you're like, thanks. How do you measure that? And they're like, oh, well, your BMI says you're obese. Okay, well, isn't it more important how much muscle mass I have versus how much fat I have? Because, I'll give you an example. You could have person A and person B. They can be the exact same height, the exact same weight, but person A is 30% fat, person B is 15% fat. If you guys were going to guess, who do you think's healthier? 30. Come on now, Larry. Troll. Sorry, that may be true. He might be happy. He might be having beer and pizza on the reg, and he's feeling great. But the person who's going to have less chronic disease is the person with less fat mass, the leaner person. These two people will step on the scale and have the identical reading. They will not look identical if you look at them side by side. You're like, that person's fatter and that person's less fat. It would be apparent to you. But according to BMI, they're exactly the same health. Does anyone see the problem with that? Yes. Huge problem with that, right? Now, here's why this matters, right? We talked a lot about like one of the dimensions of health. They have that continuum, right? We talk about sickness, wellness, fitness. Well, BMI is a health parameter, basically a measure of your health. I would argue a useless one for most people. It can send you on the right track, but relatively speaking, compared to some other more helpful metrics, BMI is pretty useless. I'd rather know my lean body mass or how much fat mass I have, because that'll tell me, what percent of my body is fat, what percent is lean body mass. Now, in obese individuals, for females, that's greater than 32% body fat. We'll talk about this in a second. And for males, that's 25%. Anything greater than 32% for females or anything greater than 25% for males, we start pushing it towards the sickness column. We're no longer a healthy individual. We are hanging on to excess levels of body fat. For wellness, for a male, we're closer to 18%, and females, 20%. Then if we want to get all the way to the fitness side, the elite athletes, the Tia Claire Toomeys, all the people that go to the CrossFit Games every year, the men are closer to 6 and the women are closer to 12. Now, like I said earlier, there is necessary to have some level of body fat. So I would argue you start getting too lean, male or female, you start to see performance drop. And I see that every year when I used to go to the CrossFit Games. Person who's ultra lean and shredded looks like they're going to fucking die on day 2 because they have no energy on their body. They've already used all of it. They need a sandwich. They're just not going to survive, right? Now, when we look at this continuum and we get our number, we can kind of plot ourselves, right? If we're somewhere between 6 and 12, 18 as a male, we're somewhere between well and fit. That's a pretty good place to be. If we're, 27% as a female, we're somewhere between sickness and wellness. The reason you should all care about this is one of the number one predictors of health and having no chronic disease is how much lean body mass you have relative to your total mass. One of the greatest predictors of health and how long you'll live disease-free. So when you go to your doctor next, if you get an opportunity, ask them about body fat percentage. Ask them about lean body mass. It's a far more effective measure of what your health actually is than your BMI. So if you or someone else gets victimized by a doctor and told them that they're a fat piece of shit because their BMI is high, tell them, take a breath. Let's get a more important, more useful bit of information. Now, of course, if they're overweight, they're probably going to have high BMI and high body fat. That's not going to say that somehow using body fat as a hack to be I'm skinny now. It's just a better data point, right? And the idea here is we want to push every one of our markers for health, all these parameters, towards fitness and away from sickness. Now, how do we do that? Exactly what's up on that poster over there. Eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. And keep our intake levels that support exercise, but not body fat. Your body is your receipt. It lets you know if you're doing on the right track. And again, any one day is not fair, but trends. I look the same I looked 6 months ago, or I look worse than I looked 6 months ago. Maybe I got to clean up my diet or go to the gym more often. I'm looking great. Actually, in fact, I think I'm getting too skinny. I got to eat a little bit more. We use our bodies as a receipt for that, but you can use things like body fat percentage to have a better connection to what your health actually is. Now, probably the last question here is how do I do this? I have one, they sell the scales, but I am here to tell you right now, They all come with varying levels of reliability and accuracy. The difference. If something is accurate, it's telling you exactly what your body fat percentage is. If it's reliable, it tells you the difference. So the tool that I have up there is very reliable, it's not super accurate. And every single body fat measurement has varying levels of accuracy. So what that thing will tell you is how much your body fat changes. But the number it gives you may or may not be perfectly accurate within a handful of percents. I don't know exactly. The standard error is somewhere in the instruction booklet I lost a long time ago. But the idea here is there are varying levels of doing this. If you really are interested in getting your body fat run, any college that has an exercise science program has all the fancy equipment, like x-rays and shit, and submerge it in a tank and pinch it all you want. So if you really want like great reliable data, look up like USM's exercise phys lab and get a real number. But for anyone else, using your scale and just checking the difference between I did it today and I did it 6 months from now is more than good enough to see the changes that your body is making. Do you guys have any questions? You're right, Larry. I think the 30% probably has a little more fun, but eats a few less carrots, has a few more slices of pizza. Hey, whatever you're into, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, well, thanks, guys.